Hello, I'm Sarah from wowenglish.co.uk and I'm here today with a video lesson all about IGCSE First Language English Paper 1, looking at that language analysis question 2. Let's get straight into it. Just to quickly say that all of the resources that you need today should be available to download in the description if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're joining me on my online course, then it should all be on the lesson materials. It looks just like this and it should be very useful, so please do make sure that you download it and use it as we go through today's lesson. So we are looking at language analysis today, and in case you didn't already know, this is what your paper 1 exam will look like. And the language analysis is question 2, which comes just after those vocabulary questions but just before the extended writing question. It's usually about a slightly more complicated text, usually a narrative. This is what I'm going to teach you today, and don't worry, we are going to come back to it to help you guys remember it. But this is how I advise all of my students to answer the question 2. Maybe you might have been taught to write a P paragraph or a peel paragraph or a what, how, why paragraph. Actually, on First Language English, for this question, you have not got the time to write a P paragraph. It's not the most efficient way to get high marks. I suggest that you use this structure instead. So you should always begin your paragraph with an overall effect sentence where you consider what is the overall effect and general tone of the paragraph that you've been asked to analyse. So what is the overall atmosphere of that paragraph? Then you should give a quote. So you should pick a very short quote, not a full sentence, maybe 4, 5, 6 words at the most, and you should quote it using speech marks. After that, you should analyse one word from the quote looking at its connotations. Connotations means what the word makes you think of. You might have sometimes heard this as like a zoom in or something like that. You're essentially thinking about the associations of the word, and we're going to look at that in more detail right after this slide. Then you should finish your sentence by looking at the effect of the quote. So what is the writer trying to suggest? What does the writer want the reader to feel, and why? And you will do this in your paragraph by going overall effect, quote, connotation effect, quote, connotation effect, quote, connotation effect. We're going to go through this. We're going to have a look at examples. I've got sentence starters. There's lots and lots of help for you on the worksheet. So if I've already lost you, don't panic. We'll get there. Beginning then with something hopefully a little bit more simple. What does the colour red make you think of? What ideas, associations, images come to your head when you think of the colour red? For me, for example, I might think of red, roses, passion. Maybe you think of something different. Take a second, pause the video if you want to, and have a think, what does the colour red make you think of? Okay, so what does the colour red make you think of? Let's have a think then. So the first things that I said were roses, passion, and love. Let me try to guess some of the things that you guys might have said. So you also could have said Valentine's Day, flowers, romance, for the more romantic of you out there. Maybe some people that love a little bit of murder mysteries and crime novels, you might have gone danger, blood, stop signs, murder. Maybe some of you, if you're based out in East Asia like China, Chinese New Year, you might think of Chinese New Year. Festivals, red packets. If you're in a culture where you get married wearing a red dress, you might think of weddings, family. And I'm sure that you thought of far more definitions than this. But what you have done here is you've actually thought about the connotations of the word red. So what is a connotation? A connotation is what a word makes you think of, its associations. Actually, if I can just try to emphasize, when I say you, let me redefine and say most people. I used to say a connotation is what a word makes you think of until my year 7s came back and were like, it makes me think of Spider-Man, it makes me think of the red jello that my mum used to make me. It should be something that like lots of people would think of, not something like very, very personal to you, but ideas or associations that like society as a whole might have towards that particular word or colour or concept. So that is what a connotation is. And please also note that a connotation is not a synonym. So for example, you can't say like a connotation of the word funny is hilarious. You can't say that because that is not a connotation, that is a synonym, right? So you need to make sure that you're giving those words that are associations of ideas, emotions, not just redefining the word, because that's not going to get you a very good mark. You have to think a little bit deeper towards its symbolic meaning, I would say. Okay. So next, maybe you're wondering, well, how do I actually use this in an exam? How do I write about this? Here's an example on the screen. The noun angel has connotations of purity, innocence and heaven, which shows the writer's sympathetic view towards the girl. So you can see here that I have gone the word class, adjective, verb, noun, adverb, preposition, whatever, quote, has connotations of 1, 2, 3. And I'm giving 3 different connotations which show that effect. So if we were going to say this about red, I would say the adjective, quote, red has connotations of, and what did we say before? Passion, romance, and roses. And then I have to say the effect, but it's hard for me to do this right now because obviously the effect would come from the text and I've just kind of pulled the word out of the air. So let me just make something up. I might say, which shows the writer's optimistic view of this fiery love. So yeah, you can see here that I've gone for word class, that it is a adjective, I've given a quote, red, has connotations of, and then I've given 3 connotations, passion, romance and roses, and then I've given an effect. If you find this very easy and you think, oh, this sounds a bit repetitive, you can also use connotations as a verb. So you don't always have to say has connotations of blah, blah, and blah. You can say the word red connotes blah, blah, and blah. So you can use it that way too if you want to shake up your paragraph a little bit. But there's no need. You don't get any marks for writing style on this question, but just so that you know, perhaps you're also doing literature GCSE and you want to use this in your literature exam. So there's a little gift from me to you. All right, so now we are going to read the extract, which is called Honey Hotel. If you want to go away and find the full past paper, then all you need to do is search IGCSE First Language paper 2, it was 0500, and you're looking for the May-June 2016 variant 1 paper. But you can find this all in my worksheet. So let's go straight over to the worksheet. I'll read it out loud for you and let's have a little read of this text. Okay, so here we are on the worksheet. And after we've read it out loud, I am going to ask you guys to write a little summary just down here of what happens in the extract. So bear that in mind as we read through, be thinking about how would you summarise this story. Let's begin. Honey Hotel. Al, the owner of Honey Hotel, wants to attract new business to his hotel and hopes that his competition winner will help him. Al waited at the airport, unusual for a hotel owner. He wanted to impress these guests. Besides, they might have difficulty persuading a taxi to drive out as far as his place. Honey Hotel's remoteness meant a 2-hour suspension-challenging drive each way. Last month, Al had advertised online. Images of classical architecture, legendary landscapes, and his newly extended dining room would entice tourists in more profitable numbers, he felt sure. Struggling to describe his hidden paradise, he'd hit on the idea of offering the chance to stay for free to anyone who successfully completed in less than 100 words why I want to visit. There'd been a handful of entries amongst the dozen or so inquiries he'd received. So he's launching a competition, a writing competition to write about his hotel, and in exchange you can come and visit for free. Mostly mediocre, his wife had observed. This one's amazing though, she'd said, passing him the name of the winner. Really understands the spirit of the place. He'd agreed. Reading the winning entry, he'd been entranced by the sensitivity with which its gifted writer staged scenes of ancient civilizations and romantic journeys along half-forgotten sandy roads, conjuring a charming mirage of whitewashed walls, embroidered gowns and orange trees laced with sunlight. Al had been immediately anxious to meet the winner, M.R. Head. Correcting the poor punctuation, he'd moved Mr. Head and his wife to the best suite, sighing over the half-full booking list. Perhaps Mr. Head could be persuaded to write a glowing review for the website. The week's itinerary had been carefully planned to encourage this. So have a think now. How is Al feeling? What does he want from the competition winner? What's your impression of both the hotel and Al so far? On the second morning, Al sourced ingredients fresh from the market as usual, doubling up on everything, an unnecessary expense, but he didn't want popular dishes to run out again tonight. Laden with the rainbow of produce he'd procured, Al worked his way back through the beehive that was the old town. Mr. Head had seemed unimpressed during their tour here yesterday, complaining loudly to his wife of straggling market stalls, tatty trinkets and bits of cloth. He'd even refused to visit the animal sanctuary or that pile of rubbish on the hilltop. At dinner, he'd even scoffed at boring plans for the next day, bullying Al into including him in a planned excursion for a group of whitewater rafters who came back year after year. Other guests said they'd also enjoy a trip on the water. So, finally, a small coach was hired. Stay on flat water if you like, Mr. Head goaded as the guests piled onto the vehicle after breakfast. I'm with the White Water Boys. Have a think then, what is your opinion of Mr. Head? How is he acting? Do you approve of his behaviour? How would you describe him? Carrying on. Only later did Al realise Mrs. Head had not gone too. She sat with a notebook under the palms on the hotel terrace. Al worried what to offer her. The coach party had decimated the breakfast banquet like a horde of locusts. He had only mint tea for his own elevensies, he explained. She was welcome to that. She accepted gratefully, remaining for nearly an hour sipping the tea and idly fussing a stray cat playing around her feet. Still later, he noticed her talking with the gardener about his bees, curious to know more about the health benefits of their honey, saddened that they were threatened by farmers guarding precious crops against other less friendly insects. Al expressed concern that the pain in her neck she'd given as a reason for not joining the others might have been caused by the pillows. He offered to change them for others less soft. No, she smiled. The pillows are perfect. The pain has gone now. Please call me Maria. What is your impression of Mrs. Head? Why is she with her husband? That evening Al was busy, so he wasn't paying full attention when the coach party returned. He caught only snippets of sniggered conversation as guests re-entered the lobby, dispersed into their rooms. Told him, should have listened. Good job the others knew what they were doing. He noticed Maria listening to one of the rafters in the corner, nodding softly, stopping only to raise her eyebrows and smile apologetically. The word hospital caught his attention. Al strained anxiously to hear more. Nothing serious. A few bruises, hurt pride. Told us he knew what he was doing, finished the rafter. Sorry to trouble you, Maria began, approaching the desk. It looks like my husband will need collecting. Could we stop off on Friday on the way back to the airport, perhaps? I'll sign any forms you require now. It wasn't anyone else's fault. He won't be putting in any kind of complaint, I promise. Relieved, Al received the incident form dated and signed. Maria Rose Head. M.R. Head, he noted. Now he understood. The question is, I guess, now do you understand? Take a second, go onto my worksheet and see if you can summarise in about 3 to 5 sentences the events of the story. Okay, so now hopefully you have written your summary. If I can summarise for you, if you'll allow me, I would say that the story is all about a hotel owner who puts together a writing competition to try to increase business to his hotel. He gets a winning entry and he mistakenly thinks that it is from the husband, who is really rude and disrespectful and doesn't appreciate the hotel and gets into an accident. Only later on does Al, the hotel owner, realise that he's made a mistake and that the person who actually wrote the beautiful and sensitive winning entry was M.R. Head, Maria Rose Head, the guy's wife. That's how I would summarise it. Sometimes students don't quite pick up on that ending, or one of my favourite mistakes that students make with this extract is they misread AL for AI, like artificial intelligence, which just goes to show that they're doing way too much science. So hopefully you got both of those things. It's AL, not AI, and that it was actually Maria who wrote the hotel entry. All right, so now let's have a go at doing some analysis. This here is the first paragraph. So in this question, you're going to be given two paragraphs that you need to analyse. And in today's lesson, we're going to do the first one together and I'll show you an example for how I analyse the first paragraph. And then I'll ask you to do the second one by yourself. So here's the first paragraph and this is the one that we're doing together. So let's read it once again. On the second morning, Al sourced ingredients fresh from the market as usual, doubling up on everything. An unnecessary expense, but he didn't want popular dishes to run out again tonight. Laden with the rainbow of produce he'd procured, Al worked his way back through the beehive that was the old town. Mr. Head had seemed unimpressed during their tour here yesterday, complaining loudly to his wife of straggling market stalls, tatty trinkets and bits of cloth. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys some images. I've got 4 different images and I want you to see if you can match up the image to the phrase in the text. So the first image is already on the screen here for you. Take a second, can you figure out which bit of the text this picture relates to? This image then does relate to a rainbow of produce. Because obviously you have got the rainbow, but produce means like food, vegetables, fruit, like food that you could get and buy from like a farmer's market. The next image is this one here. What word or phrase does this relate to in the text? You've got while I drink my cup of tea. So this one does relate to, where is it? I've lost it. Beehive, yeah. So this is beehive, suggesting how busy the old town was, how bustling, how full of life. And again, you might want to notice here an image of nature coming up again. Rainbow, produce, beehive, right? Definitely some natural imagery coming up. The next image is this one here. Now, what word or phrase do you think that this one relates to? A little bit longer so you can have at least 2 gulps of my cup of tea to figure this one out. Thought I heard my cat. Okay. So this one here does relate to straggling market stalls. So if something's straggling, it's quite empty, it's not busy, it's not economically successful, there's very, very few people, there's not a lot of life about it. And have a think, how does that contrast to the previous words that we've had a little talk about so far? Are we getting a consistent image here? And if it's not consistent, then why? Why is the writer doing that? And you might want to think about the speech marks there, that might give you a clue. The final image then is this one here. What word or phrase does this relate to? And once again, you have got 2 gulps to figure it out. Hopefully you can't hear me gulping too loud. I don't want to create like a weird ASMR video. All right, so this one related to tatty trinkets. If something's tatty, like it's not very good quality, it's a little bit cheap, maybe makes me think of like cheap plastic souvenirs that you get on holiday, like this picture over here. Definitely not something that you would treasure. Definitely not something expensive or special. Could be something that's very, very mass produced and of a poor quality. So we've kind of got this contrast, I would say, of the imagery that we would use to describe the old town according to Al and probably Maria Rose Head versus the quote of what Mr. Head is saying. So Mr. Head is saying that it's the town has got straggling market stalls, tatty trinkets and bits of cloth. He's being quite rude and dismissive and harsh about the town, whereas we can see maybe the reality is more like it's very natural, it's very beautiful, it's unpretentious, it's very rustic, it's very, very natural and beautiful, but not in like a self-conscious way. So you've got that contrast of the different ideas here. So that kind of brings us together to the questions. Have a little think. What is the overall effect of this paragraph? How would you summarise in one sentence the effect of that paragraph? What words or phrases would you want to analyse? And you could pick the ones that we've just spoken about, or you could pick some other ones, that's fine. After you've picked out your words or phrases, have a think. What connotations would you analyse in those quotes? And then finally, what's the effect? What is the writer trying to suggest about the description of the location? So there is a space on your worksheet, if I can just pull it up for you. Yeah, there's a space in your worksheet just here and also a copy of the paragraph. So you can write in your overall effect sentence and then write a little plan. So write out your 3 quotes that you would analyse, think about the connotations and then the effect and just copy that in here. So pause the screen now, go off and do that for me, and then restart the video once you've finished. So now I'm going to give you a suggestion of what I would say. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing. There are definitely different bits of analysis that you could say, but I think it has to be in the same ballpark, right? If you're saying something wildly different, then probably you've not got the mark or you've missed the point of the paragraph. So CIE say that the general effect of this paragraph is to show the abundance and richness of produce, along with Al's care and effort compared to Mr. Head's insensitive and dismissive attitude. So you've got that contrast there of Al and all of the natural, beautiful imagery and all of the things he's trying to do to show that he cares versus Mr. Head, who is completely insensitive, completely unappreciative and is just complaining and being rude. So you need to show that understanding of that contrast there to get a higher mark. So the way that I would do it, maybe if I pick out the phrase rainbow of produce, right? Say that that's what I'm going to analyse. And I think from that word, I might talk about the word rainbow the most. So let me just underline it. And so I will be talking about its connotations. So what connotations does the word rainbow have? Well, for sure, nature, beauty, rare, you don't see them very often, right? Colourful, maybe magical, because you have that association, don't you, with a pot of gold underneath the rainbow, so something to be treasured. Precious. So those would be the connotations that I would pick out. So maybe I would say the writer uses the image rainbow of produce. The word rainbow has got connotations of something being magical, colourful, natural, beautiful, rare, and something that you should treasure, which suggests that the writer is trying to show us how wonderful the area is, in order to contrast like this wonderful special area with how dismissive Mr. Head is being, and that might be what I would say there. And then I might talk about Mr. Head. Let me just erase what I've written so far so that I can do it for a different quote. So next I would talk about Mr. Head, and let me pick a good quote. Let's do tatty. So say if I was going to talk about tatty trinkets, where is my pen? She's over here. Tatty. So the connotations of the word tatty, I would say cheap, easily broken, trash, worthless, mass-produced, and so I would say, so versus Mr. Head, who's talking about tatty trinkets, the word tatty has got connotations of easily broken, trash, something being worthless and mass-produced, which shows and emphasises how Mr. Head doesn't really appreciate what a special place he's in. He's not looking at things clearly. He's not being appreciative of all of the efforts that Al is going to for him. So that would be how I would analyse that quote right there. Next, I want to show you guys an example of a full paragraph, right? So how would you actually write this up? So over here is my exemplar response. Let's read it together. The overall effect of the second paragraph is to contrast the caring richness of Al and local culture with the insensitive and rude behaviour of Mr. Head. So there's my overall effect sentence. Firstly, the image of a rainbow of produce emphasises the natural beauty of the market and the rich variety of foods available. The noun rainbow has connotations of being special, healthy, abundance and rare, which emphasises Mr. Head's crass behaviour at not appreciating how rare this sight is. Secondly, the author then uses Mr. Head's insensitive language to show his disgusting attitude. For example, the image of tatty trinkets demonstrates how unappreciative he is of this experience. The adjective tatty has connotations of trash, unimportant and insignificant, showing Mr. Head's critical and dismissive tone. Finally, Mr. Head also speaks of straggling market stalls, with the word straggling having connotations of chaotic, disorganised and shabby. This contrasts the unique and special landscape with Mr. Head's completely negative view of that exact same landscape, making the reader feel uncomfortable with Mr. Head's inappropriate behaviour. Now there's a copy of this on your worksheet, and what I want you to do is to analyse it. So I want you to tick where I've put my overall effect sentence. I want you to highlight any quotes that I've used. I want you to underline the connotations, and I want you to put a star where I've written the effect of a quote. So pause the video now, do this on your worksheet, and then restart the video lesson where we'll go through it together. Okay, so beginning with the overall effect sentence, so I kind of gave that away earlier, but basically it is this first sentence here. The overall effect of the second paragraph is to contrast the caring richness of Al and local culture with the insensitive and rude behaviour of Mr. Head. So you do always need to begin with this overall effect sentence. Why? Well, because CIE actually have the overall effect sentence in their mark scheme. And so if you can get the correct overall effect, you're instantly telling the examiner, I understand how language works. I got this, bro. Don't worry. And then you're more likely to get a higher mark. Not only that, but it also focuses your own writing. So if it makes you think about what is the overall effect before you start writing, and then you get halfway through your answer and you're like, but what's the overall effect? Your response isn't going to be very focused. You're not going to get a very good mark. So it helps the examiner and it helps you. So that's why you should always begin that way. Next, we're also looking for the quotes. So let me just change the colour of my highlighter. So the exam asks that you pick 3 images per paragraph. So here are my 3 images right here. We have got rainbow of produce, tatty trinkets and straggling market stalls. Easy. Next, my connotations. The connotations come pretty much straight after the quote. So over here, the noun rainbow has connotations of being special, health, abundance and rare. Adjective tatty has connotations of trash, unimportance and insignificant. And finally, the word straggling has connotations of chaotic, disorganised and shabby. There are my connotations. Then finally, the effect. So the effect usually comes after the connotations, right? Which emphasises Mr. Head's crass behaviour at not appreciating how rare this sight is, shows his disgusting attitude, demonstrates how unappreciative he is of the experience, and then over here, talking about contrast, that is the effect too. contrasting the unique and special landscape with Mr. Head's completely negative view of that exact same landscape, making the reader feel uncomfortable with Mr. Head's inappropriate behaviour. So this here is what your writing should look like once you've finished. You should begin with one overall effect sentence and then 3 quotes. You should make sure you use speech marks for your quotes, you go into connotations, then briefly give an effect straight after. Like I said before, if you've been taught PE or PEAL or whatever, this is slightly different, but it is more likely to get you a higher mark, it is more likely to save time, and it hits the mark scheme better for CIE. So I do recommend that you use my structure. Okay. Also, if we can just go back, if you wanted to have a look at Cambridge's mark scheme for that first paragraph, you can just pause the screen here. This is what they say you could have spoken about for any of that paragraph. Okay, so now we are over to you. Now what I recommend that you do is you have a read through of this paragraph and you fill in the planning section on the worksheet before starting writing. This here is the paragraph that you're going to analyse. He agreed. Reading the winning entry, he'd been entranced by the sensitivity with which its gifted writer staged scenes of ancient civilizations and romantic journeys along half-forgotten sandy roads, conjuring a charming mirage of whitewashed walls, embroidered gowns and orange trees laced with sunlight. So once again, you're answering these 3 questions first as your plan. What is the overall effect of the paragraph? Then you need to pick out 3 words or phrases that support that show the overall effect. Then you're going to think about their connotations, and finally you're going to think about the writer's effect. So there is a space for you to do that just down here on your worksheet. Here's the paragraph, here's a space for the overall effect, and here's the planning. After that, I recommend that you just start writing. If you are finding this really, really hard, then there are some sentence starters that you can use here if you like. Another option, of course, is not to pause the video in a second and listen to me talk first. That's okay, but I do really recommend that you have a crack at doing this by yourself first. So pause the video now, go over to the worksheet, do the plan and do the writing, and I'll see you guys in a second. Welcome back. I hope that went well for you. Now let's talk about what you could have written and the overall effect. So the overall effect of this paragraph is to suggest the bewitching, magical, romantic, romanticized version of this place in the writing. And these are some of the words or phrases that I think would have been really, really good to pick out. Entranced, sensitivity, ancient civilizations, half-forgotten sandy roads, charming mirage, and laced with sunlight. Let's have a look further. This here is the mark scheme. So these are the things that CIE suggests you could have written about. Once again, you could obviously write about things that aren't on this mark scheme, but probably your answer wouldn't be quite so strong. And also you want to make sure that your analysis is still generally getting the overall effect. You need to have something about it being romantic, beautiful and magical, right? Like her writing is making the place seem really, really magical. And if you haven't quite grasped that, you're not going to get in the top band, no matter what you've picked out, because that's what CIE say generally the overall effect is. So the things that you could have written about them. So with the word entranced, let me just pull up my highlighter. The word entranced, right? This is trying to show that it's something magical. If you're in a trance, right, it's like you're hypnotized by magic. So it shows how captivating, mesmerizing, bewitched as by a spell suggests the power of her words. Like her words are casting a spell on you. And that's also really similar to these ideas of conjuring a mirage. So conjure, if you conjure something, you make something from nothing, right? Like you can conjure water, you can cast a spell and get water. So producing something from nothing suggests magical writing and that she's an artist. Mirage, if you've ever seen like those cartoons where you're walking through a desert and you're really, really thirsty, and then in the distance you see like wavy lines and like, I don't know, a pool or water or the sea in the distance. That's a mirage. So it's suggesting an attractive illusion of the place, that it's quaint, that it's spellbinding, like it's like a hallucination in the desert. So there's one theme, right? So you've got the theme of magic in those three words. And then you've got the idea of something being really ancient. So staged scenes of ancient civilizations. So it's treating the hotel like it's a piece of classical theatre, like you're going back in time, showing how the place is steeped in history. It's not been touched by the modern world, right? So like stepping back in time and going back to like this purer, more simple, beautiful time before, I don't know, technology came and ruined everything, I guess. Next, you've got some romantic imagery, I would say, in the last ones that I've not spoken about. So romantic journeys along half-forgotten sandy roads. So firstly, you could say it shows that it's a quiet place, unpopulated, not bothered by people, not crowded, not like a hustle and bustle city or something. Showing it's unpopulated, it's rustic, which means it's in the countryside. Quite an idealised image. Like we all think, oh, going to nature would be wonderful and magical. But then you get there and you're like, oh, my phone doesn't work and I'm getting bitten by mosquitoes and I'm kind of hungry, right? But we still romanticize the image. We've still got this romantic idea of being out in nature. And that's very much what Maria Head is playing on in her description. Some escapism from the modern world and showing how peaceful it is. The whitewashed walls of the hotel, showing that the hotel is bright and pure, it's dazzling, maybe that could link to magic again. Unpretentious, simple, right? It's not like flashing with lots and lots of signs and posters. It's just quietly beautiful, simply beautiful, classically beautiful. It's simple, it's pristine, it's pure, so anything like that. And then with embroidered gowns and laced with sunlight, CIE tie these two images together. Embroidered gowns are dresses. If something's embroidered, it means it's got tiny little stitches and patterns put into it. So it suggests the richness and detail of the fabric, because if you embroider something, it takes a really, really long time to do. It's usually hand embroidered, right? That is really authentic, like real countryside, the real country, rather than something mass produced in a factory. So lots of time and care and attention has gotten into it, suggesting it's traditional, it's crafted. And then just like the gowns and dresses are handcrafted with all these small, delicate, intricate patterns, you can also say like the landscape matches that. So laced with sunlight, if you think about the fabric of lace, right, like this see-through, I don't really know how to describe it. If you imagine like a wedding dress, like Kate Middleton's wedding dress or something, and she had the lacy arms there with the delicate patterns and like flowers and all that kind of thing. So just like that, the sun is shining through the spaces in between the branches, creating patterns on the floor. Streaked or dappled light extends the embroidery idea. So just like you have like an embroidered dress on the floor, you'd have all of these delicate, intricate patterns created by the sun shining through the branches of the trees, making a beautiful pattern in shadow on the floor. So this idea of embroidery again, something crafted, something subtle, something beautiful, intricate and delicate. So these are the different ideas that you could have written about in your answer. So my overall tips then for question 2 to summarise, and hopefully you guys did these, we'll see. So you always begin your paragraph by talking about the overall effect. So what is the general effect and tone of the whole paragraph? Then you'll pick out a very short quote, don't copy out whole sentences, and don't forget to use those speech marks, and it should be 3 per paragraph. And don't forget to pick out connotations. What do those words make you think of? And then finally, you'll say, what is the effect of the language used in your quote? What does the writer want you to think or feel, and why? If you ever do need extra help with this, then here are my sentence starters. And they are also on your worksheet, but maybe you might want to take a screenshot of this. If you're someone that really, really struggles to get on your marked practices above like a 9 out of 15, and you're really like a DCB sort of range, then it might be useful to just take these sentence starters and always use them. Because if you look at the mark scheme from CIE, on that third band from the top, so like a mid-range grade, they say you attempt to pick out some language, you attempt to explain the words, And if you follow this sentence structure, even if you don't have a clue, like no idea what the words mean, if you follow this sentence structure, you will meet the criteria for that mark scheme of you've picked out a quote, you've picked out an image, and you have tried, right? You haven't done it successfully, but you've tried to explain the meaning. This structure here will help you always get that and kind of protect you from bombing out and getting a 0 on that question. So you can just take this and use this for your notes. Finally, I want you guys to have a go at marking your own language analysis. So go back to your writing on your worksheet, which I know you all did. And I want you to tick your overall effect sentence, which should come at the beginning of your paragraph. I want you to underline the quotes that you've used and make sure that you have got 3 quotes in your paragraph. I want you to circle the connotations. Once again, you should have 3 in your paragraph. Highlight where you've said the effect. So what was the writer trying to suggest? What is the general effect of that quote? What does the writer want the reader to feel and why? Put a star next to your best piece of analysis. So which quote do you think that you analysed the best and why? Which bit of analysis are you like, yeah, I did a good job there. If that was something original, I met the mark scheme really good there, or I thought of a really good point, put a star next to that one. And did you remember to write in one paragraph? Because all of this, although it's in 4 bullet points, should be one paragraph joined together. You don't need to start a new line for each of those. So that's my overall advice for this question. Here are 2 extension activities, just in case you would like to go and challenge yourself some more. So can you go away, pick out a verse from your favourite song and write an analysis of that verse? Or can you try to write your own description and then analyse your own choice of language? There are 2 more extension tasks if you want to do them, which I know of course you'll be buzzing to do after this lesson. But for now, that is the end of my lesson. I do hope that you found it useful, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Head over to wowenglish.co.uk for more resources like this, and I'll see you guys next time.